Before we begin, confirm your authorization level. Subscribe to Project Echo to retain continued access to classified acoustic anomalies and to receive alerts on cases where sound becomes a vector of contamination. This file concerns an event known internally as Project Cold Choir, a linguistic anomalous incident involving 12 children from Northwood Elementary who, on the morning of January 14th, began singing a melody no linguist on record has yet been able to classify. The event lasted 7 minutes and 26 seconds. What occurred in that short span of time triggered a federal lockdown, the evacuation of an entire district, and the sealing of a school that now remains permanently closed under the pretext of structural instability. The first recorded moment happened at 8:13 a.m. A teacher supervising morning arrival noticed 3 students standing perfectly still beside the flagpole, their backpacks resting at their feet, their faces lifted toward the sky. Their mouths moved silently at first, but according to witness accounts, the air around them seemed to tighten, as if the schoolyard itself were holding its breath. Then the sound emerged, a soft, resonant hum, unlike any known vocal tone, a frequency too low for children to sustain, yet rising in pitch with impossible steadiness. Other students stopped walking. Some cried. Some covered their ears without knowing why. Several reported that the sound did not travel through the air but vibrated from inside their bodies. By 8:14 a.m., 9 additional children had joined the first 3, forming a perfect arc on the pavement. Their mouths opened wider, their tones sharpened, their harmony aligned with unnatural precision, as if conducted by something external. A teacher's attempt to intervene failed. She later stated that when she stepped toward the group, her vision blurred and her knees weakened. Like walking into deep water, she said. Like the ground was no longer for me. The children's eyes remained open, unblinking. Witnesses described them as glassy, reflecting the sky even when facing away from it. By 8:15, the hum transformed into a sequence of rising and falling phonemes. 12 voices merging into a single linguistic structure, yet with no articulation resembling human speech. Audio recordings captured by the school's security system show patterns that match no Earth language, no known grammar, no phonetic family, no acoustic lineage. Forensic linguists were later unable to determine whether the sounds were produced intentionally or if the children were merely vessels for something speaking through them. At 8:16, the first anomaly occurred. A thin frost formed around the arc of children, despite the temperature being a mild 11 degrees Celsius. The frost expanded outward in a perfect semicircle, as though following an inaudible mathematical rule. Parents arriving at the school reported feeling a sudden pressure in their ears followed by an overwhelming sense of dread, prompting several to reverse their cars and flee. The children continued singing, their faces growing pale, their breath visible as if the air around them had dropped below freezing. One child, Hannah Rhodes, lifted her hand toward the sky. A second harmonic appeared beneath her voice, vibrating the flagpole so violently that its metal clip snapped. Several students collapsed, clutching their heads. One vomited. Another screamed that the sound was trying to pull him apart. At 8:17, the school's fire alarm activated without human input. Tree recording system registered a surge in electromagnetic interference. 2 teachers attempted to physically move the children, but both fell unconscious upon touching the frost boundary. One suffered temporary paralysis on the left side of her body. The children reached the midpoint of their melody, a pattern that repeated every 9 seconds, with minor fluctuations in pitch that analysts later described as adaptations, as though the choir were adjusting to something responding to them. At 8:18, the frost grew thicker. A faint mist rose from the ground, not warm condensation, but a cold emission that drifted upward against the wind. The singing grew louder, not violently loud, but overwhelmingly resonant, vibrating the glass of the classroom windows. Some of the younger students described seeing shapes in the air around the choir, distortions, like heat haze in reverse. One teacher activated the district emergency line, stating only, "We need help. They aren't stopping. Please, hurry." The call cut off mid-sentence. At 8:19 a.m., the anomaly reached its apex. The children's mouths opened wider than typical anatomical range. Their voices split into harmonics that no untrained throat could produce without tissue damage. A low-frequency rumble shook the pavement. 3 nearby lampposts flickered simultaneously. A car alarm blared and then died. All 12 children lifted their heads straight upward in perfect synchronization. Then the final linguistic anomaly occurred. The choir produced a single, piercing note, a frequency so pure and so sharp that several glass panes shattered instantly, and then everything stopped. The frost evaporated. The mist dissipated. The children lowered their heads as one and collapsed onto the pavement. Their pulses were steady, their breathing normal, but every one of them was unconscious. At 8:20 a.m., witnesses reported hearing one faint sound, a whisper shared between the children despite their unconscious state. "Listen." Emergency services flooded the school within minutes, but by the time medical teams reached the choir, the frost had vanished completely. Only the melted water on the pavement remained. The children showed no signs of hypothermia, no throat damage, no physical stress. Their vital signs were stable, unchanged, synchronized. All 12 were transported to Red Pines Medical Center under federal escort. Local police were removed from the perimeter. Parents were told a chemical inhalation event had occurred, but internal surveillance caught something the public never saw: footage of the children being loaded into ambulances, their eyes fluttering open for brief moments, all gazing in the same direction, northeast, toward something far beyond the school, toward something none of them had ever seen. When the children regained consciousness at Red Pines, they no longer spoke. Not English, not the anomaly language, not anything. Their mouths opened as if anticipating sound, but no vibrations emerged. Doctors reported that their vocal cords appeared slightly elongated, with faint crystalline residue coating the inner lining, a substance that evaporated upon exposure to air. No swabs detected pathogens, no scans revealed trauma, but EEG activity told a different story. All 12 children shared an identical neural pattern, a slow, oscillating wave that pulsed at the same rhythmic interval as the original melody. Their brain activity was synchronized, not similar, but identical, down to the millisecond. The medical team attempted routine neurological tests. The children stared past the exam lights, their eyes unfocused yet intentionally still, as if listening for a signal only they could perceive. At 10:47 a.m., one child, Marcus Vell, raised his hand and pressed it flat against the observation glass. A second later, all 11 others did the same. Their mouths opened. Still no sound emerged, but the glass vibrated. Scientists placed instruments near the window. They detected frequencies so low they barely registered as sound. Infrasonic pulses traveling not from the children's throats, but from somewhere deeper within their bodies. The pulses matched the missing intervals in the morning melody, the gaps linguists had been unable to classify, as if the melody was not complete, as if this was only the beginning. By early afternoon, federal containment units had secured the medical wing. Visitors were removed. Staff were reshuffled. Entire floors were sealed under fabricated asbestos protocols. The children were transferred to 12 identical isolation rooms, arranged in a perfect ring around a central monitoring hub, a design chosen not for medical necessity, but for acoustic triangulation. Each room was equipped with microphones capable of capturing subharmonic frequencies below the human threshold. Immediately, technicians noticed an anomaly, even when silent. The children emitted faint oscillations that converged in the center of the ring. The pattern resembled the early stages of resonance mapping, a kind of psychic sonar, growing stronger by the hour. At 12:33 p.m., the first coordinated event occurred. All 12 children sat upright at the exact same millisecond, their heads turned toward the same compass direction, northeast. A vibration, measured at 18 hertz, pulsed through the floor. Staff reported feeling their teeth buzz, their vision blur, their stomachs twist. One technician vomited and had to be evacuated. The children's eyes opened wider as the frequency intensified. Their pupils contracted sharply, like adjusting to an invisible flash. Then they began to sing again, not aloud, but internally. EEG monitors spiked, translating neural impulses into waveforms identical to the melody recorded at the schoolyard. But this version was longer, more structured, more intentional. Linguistic analysis determined that the melody's shorthand mapped to grammar-like units. It wasn't random. It wasn't emotional expression. It was communication. Communication with what, however, remained unclear. At 12:34 p.m., something unprecedented occurred. The children's breathing synchronized into a steady, unnatural rhythm. Their chest expansions measured identically, same amplitude, same duration, as though a single organism controlled 12 lungs. Temperature readings inside the isolation rooms dropped by 6 degrees Celsius within seconds. Frost formed on the metal vents. The children remained unaffected, their skin warm to the touch. When a nurse attempted to place a pulse oximeter on Marcus's Vell's finger, the device malfunctioned, displaying a looping error code never seen before. At 12:35 p.m., the children opened their mouths. Nothing came out, but the microphones captured a secondary frequency higher. Sharper, something like the beginning of another linguistic sequence. The resonance grew too strong for the staff to handle. Many were ordered to retreat to the monitoring hub while specialized analysts arrived. One of them, Dr. Lena Harrow, described hearing the melody in her skull even before entering the observation chamber. She reported the sensation of a word forming behind her ears, like someone whispering from inside the bone. Her preliminary evaluation was stark. This is not a language the children learned. This is a language they are receiving. Security questioned her meaning. She clarified. They are repeating something broadcast to them. Broadcast from where? A guard asked. Dr. Harrow did not respond. The next event occurred at 12:36 p.m. All 12 children leaned forward simultaneously and touched the floor with their palms. The floor vibrated. At first, the tremors were too subtle to register. Then, slowly, geometric patterns began forming in the dust arcs, intersecting lines, spirals widening outward. These were not random. Analysts later determined the shapes matched acoustic interference diagrams used in studying unknown frequencies, almost as if the children were modeling the structure of what they were hearing. But the pattern did not stay flat. Dust began rising, lifting from the floor in thin, trembling strands, forming three-dimensional shapes, impossible without airflow manipulation. A guard panicked and pressed the alarm. The vibration ceased instantly. The dust fell. The children sat upright again, hands folded, blank expressions restored. Only then did the staff realize their mistake. The children were not reacting to observation. They were reacting to interruption. At 12:39 p.m., a containment directive was issued. No sudden sounds, no alarms, no metal-on-metal noise. The children's frequencies responded violently to disruption. A linguist reviewing the footage noted something chilling. The patterns lifted from the dust resembled waveforms from deep space radio anomalies, signals received decades ago but never decoded. The implication was immediate and terrifying. Whatever the children were singing, it did not originate from Earth. At 12:41 p.m., One child, Eliza Monroe, began tapping her thumb rhythmically against her knee. 11 others followed. The taps matched the missing time gaps in the earlier melody. Dr. Harrow described the tapping as linguistic punctuation. The melody was not a song. It was structured information. At 12:42 p.m., the children turned their heads toward the glass simultaneously, their eyes unfocused, their mouths opened. Then, for the first time since arriving at the hospital, sound emerged. A single note, fragile, high-pitched, trembling like the cry of metal under stress. All 12 voices layered into the note. Not harmonizing, not matching, layering, as though stacking frequencies to reach a precise acoustic threshold. The glass fogged instantly. Frost crawled across the surface. The lights dimmed. One technician collapsed from sudden vertigo. Another screamed that he could hear letters in the sound. Dr. Harrow recorded the event, describing the note as a phoneme produced by something that does not rely on lungs or vocal cords. The note ended abruptly at 12:43 p.m. The children inhaled sharply, as though surfacing from underwater. Then they whispered, "It hears us." Their voices were dissonant, uncoordinated, human again, which somehow made the whisper more disturbing. Security demanded clarification. The children did not respond. Their eyes drifted to the corners of the room, following something the cameras could not detect. At 12:45 p.m., all 12 collapsed again, this time seizing violently. Their EEGs spiked off skill into patterns that resembled radio static. Doctors rushed in with sedatives, but the seizures stopped on their own the moment the syringes entered the room. The children sat upright again, eyes blank, breathing steady. Then they began speaking, not singing, in the same impossible language as before. Harsh glottal phonemes, layered with tones no human mouth should form. Their speech crescendoed. The walls vibrated. Equipment rattled. The frost returned. And after 15 seconds, the children fell silent. Dr. Harrow reviewed the audio immediately. There was no doubt. The children were not improvising. They were repeating a message from elsewhere. The message the children repeated lasted exactly 15 seconds. Linguistic analysis later revealed it contained no repetition, no symmetry, no human linguistic architecture. It was as though each second belonged to a different grammatical dimension. At 12:49 p.m., moments after the final phoneme ceased, every microphone in the containment ring captured a sudden spike, a frequency so sharp the software labeled it unknown event. The children inhaled simultaneously, their chests rising with unnatural steadiness. A vibration rippled across the floors, causing dust to scatter in circular patterns. Ceiling tiles rattled. One light fixture fell and shattered. The frequency deepened. A low, resonant thrum shook the glass walls of the observation hub. Personnel retreated, covering their ears despite no audible sound. Inside the isolation rooms, the children rose to their feet, their shoulders lifted in unison, their heads tilted at the same angle as earlier that morning. Then their mouths opened. Sound erupted, not a song, not speech, but something like a cross between a choir and a seismic event. Analysts later described it as the harmonic structure of tectonic plates shifting. It was impossibly loud without being heard, felt more than perceived. A pressure wave disguised as melody. Frost burst across the floors, racing up the walls. Heart monitors spiked and flatlined in alternating rhythms. One technician collapsed, blood streaming from his nose. The children lifted their arms, palms outward, as though presenting themselves to something unseen. Their voices layered into 12 distinct frequencies, weaving in and out of phase until they fused into a single note. A hole formed in the frost at their feet, a perfect circle, as if eroded by pure heat or pure cold. Dr. Harrow watched from the observation hub, trembling. Her notes from that moment remained sealed, but one line was later leaked. The sound is not coming from them. It is coming through them. At 12:51 p.m., the building shook violently. Windows spider-webbed. Emergency lights flickered erratically. A high-pitched screech filled the hallways, not mechanical, but biological, like the cry of a massive organism being compressed through too small a space. The children's eyes rolled back. Their fingers extended stiffly. Their spines arched. The note shifted into a rapid-fire sequence of phonemes. A message, urgent, repeated 3 times. When analysts later isolated the recording, they found a chilling pattern. The final sequence inversely matched a deep space transmission detected in 1979, known publicly as a radio anomaly and privately as the First Choir. The implication was unavoidable. The children were responding to something that had been calling for decades. At 12:52 p.m., the lights went out. Every machine died at once. Monitors, ventilators, door locks, all silenced. In the darkness, the children continued singing, their bodies faintly illuminated by the frost's residual glow. Security attempted to manually force the doors, but the metal was frozen solid. A guard burned his hand through a layer of gloves. Finally, backup generators roared to life, flooding the ring with harsh yellow light. The children were no longer standing. They lay motionless on the floors of their rooms, palms still outstretched, eyes staring upward as though watching something rise through the ceiling. Their mouths were open, not singing, not breathing. For 5 seconds, the entire facility stood silent. Then every child inhaled with a violent gasp, arching upward as if yanked by invisible strings. They exhaled a single word in English, coming. Immediately a shockwave slammed through the complex. Reinforced walls cracked. Observation glass exploded outward. Personnel were thrown to the ground, clutching their ears, experiencing vertigo so severe several vomited. The harmonics shifted to an irregular pulse, a coded signal. Something like a countdown. Dr. Harrow screamed to shut the rooms down, but the security system had been overridden by something generating commands faster than the manual interface allowed. The children's bodies convulsed. Their skin rippled. Patterns formed beneath the surface, geometric shapes, pulsing like living diagrams. One child reached toward the camera, fingers trembling. A single tear fell from his eye, crystallizing instantly into frost. He whispered, "It found us." His lips continued to move after the whisper ended, forming shapes no camera software could interpret. At 12:55 p.m., the final phenomenon began. The isolation rooms vibrated in alternating pulses, converging into a harmonic structure, a lattice of sound mapped across the floors and walls. When visualized later, the harmonic lattice resembled a star map, a map of a region of space with no known stars. The children lifted off the ground. Not far, just a few centimeters, suspended by resonance. Frost spun around them in spirals, defying airflow. Dr. Harrow shouted for the harmonic dampeners, but they activated too slowly. At 12:56 p.m., the children screamed, not in pain, but in communication, a sustained harmonic blast so complex that audio software could not convert it into a waveform. The blast shattered every remaining window and ruptured several pipes in the lower floors. Then silence. The children collapsed. Their vital signs stabilized instantly, too instantly, as though restored by an external correction rather than biological recovery. When they opened their eyes, the frost faded. The vibration ceased. The harmonic lattice dissolved, and all 12 said the same sentence. It heard us. It knows the way. Act 4, the cover-up, 23 o'clock to 26 minutes and 0 seconds. O silenciamento do coral, the facility was evacuated under the pretense of a gas leak. Personnel were detained for immediate debriefing. Several were sedated after reporting auditory hallucinations mimicking the children's melody. Project Cold Choir was reclassified to Level Echo Prime, reserved for anomalies with potential off-world origin. The children were placed in long-term observation units. Their EEG patterns ceased synchronization, but retained faint echoes of the harmonic pulses. Each child reported the same dream that night, standing in a vast dark plain beneath a sky without stars, listening to something enormous breathing just beyond sight. Parents were informed that their children suffered temporary neurological seizures. None questioned it, not after signing non-disclosure agreements enforced by federal penalties. Red Pines Medical Center was permanently closed. Official cause? Hazardous mold contamination. The frost marks on the floors were removed with industrial grinders. The acoustic damage to the walls was painted over. The recordings were sealed. Most personnel never heard them again. But the analysts who continued studying the audio discovered a terrifying detail. Hidden beneath the children's singing was a faint secondary signal. Deeper, older, more complex. A voice responding. The voice contained the repeated pattern resembling coordinates. Coordinates pointing to a region of space where radio telescopes later detected a signal so faint it was initially dismissed as background noise. The signal was not new. It had been transmitting for at least 40 years, waiting for a reply. Project Cold Choir concluded that the children did not create the message. They completed it. The final line of the report remains unredacted. If the choir sang once, it can sing again. A note was added beneath it by an unknown analyst. Next time, something might answer more clearly. This concludes Restricted Archive, ECH012. Monitor all instances of child harmonic anomalies, spontaneous linguistic patterns, and unexplained frost formation. If you ever hear the melody even faintly, leave the area immediately. It is not meant for human ears.